the recording will be posted on the Naranon, Ontario website, and I will put the link in the chat as we go along. So to avoid background noise, please remember to mute your microphones unless you're sharing. And let's just take a moment of silence for the friends and family members who have not yet found the rooms of Naranon, followed by the Serenity Prayer, which is on page 1 of the Blue Book and will be on the screen. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Okay, let's dive right in with the newcomer's welcome. Can I have a volunteer to read the newcomer's welcome?
I can do that if you like. It's Carolyn.
Okay, Carolyn, go ahead.
The Naranon Family Group is primarily for you who know or have known a feeling of desperation concerning the addiction problem of someone very near to you. We have traveled that unhappy road too and found the answer was serenity and peace of mind. When you come into the family group, you are no longer alone, but among true friends who understand your problem as few others could. We will respect your confidence and anonymity as we know you will respect ours. We hope to give you the assurance that no situation is too difficult and no unhappiness is too great to be overcome. Our program, which is not a religious one but a spiritual way of life, is based on the 12 steps of Naranon. We have found that the working of these steps will bring the solution to practically any problem. We urge you to take this program and its 12 steps seriously. It's been as helpful to us as the Narcotics Anonymous program is to the addict. We only ask for the wisdom and courage to see ourselves as we really are, to do something about ourselves with the help of a higher power as we understand this, and for the grace to release our addicts with love and cease trying to change them. Keep an open mind and attend as many meetings as possible. Feel free to share during the meeting. You may ask questions after the meeting. You will soon make new friends and will feel very much a part of the group. With the understanding that addiction is a disease and the realization that we are powerless over it as well as over other people's lives, we are ready to do something useful and constructive with our own. Then, and only then, can we be of any help to others. Thank you for letting me read.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you for your service. Can I have a volunteer to read the 12 steps?
I can do
that, Lisa. It's Cheryl.
Okay. Betty, you do the 12 steps, and Cheryl, can you do the 12 traditions?
Sure.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Betty.
The 12 steps of Naranon family groups. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over the addict, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Thank you for letting me serve.
Thank you for your service, Betty. Okay, Cheryl.
Okay, 12 traditions of Naranon family groups. Our group experience suggests that the unity of the Naranon family groups depends upon our adherence to these traditions. 1. Our common welfare should come first. Personal progress for the greatest number depends on unity. 2, for our group purposes, there is but one authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. 3, the relatives of addicts, when gathered for mutual aid, may call themselves an Ar-Anon family group, provided that as a group they have no other affiliation. The only requirement for membership is that there be a problem of addiction in a relative or friend. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other Nar-Anon family groups or NA as a whole. 5, each Nar-Anon family group has but one purpose, to help families of addicts. We do this by practicing the 12 steps of Nar-Anon, by encouraging and understanding our addicted relatives, and by welcoming and giving comfort to families of addicts. 6, our family groups ought never to endorse, finance, or lend our name to any outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary spiritual aim. But although a separate entity, we should always cooperate with Narcotics Anonymous. 7, every group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Nar-Anon 12th step work should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, our groups as such ought never to be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, the Nar-Anon family groups have no opinion on outside issues, hence our name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, films, internet, and other forms of mass media. We need guard with special care the anonymity of all NA members. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles above personalities. Thank you for letting me read.
Thank you for your service, Cheryl. Okay, can I have someone read this Keeping Our Meetings Healthy? I've lost a page of my notes, and so we're going to have this read instead. Can I have a volunteer to do that?
I can do that, Lisa.
Okay, great. Catherine, go ahead.
Keeping our meetings healthy. To ensure the success of our meetings and solving our common problems, we must recognize and avoid 3 destructive forces that can create dissension and ultimately destroy the group. The first destructive force is the discussion of any religious denomination. Addiction respects no particular religion, and therefore our program must be designed to help us regardless of our various beliefs. Let us not defeat our purpose by discussing any particular denomination. The second destructive force is gossip. We're here to help ourselves and others by sharing our experience, strength, and hope while we keep the focus on ourselves. Gossip about others, including the addict, will defeat our purpose. We know that nobody wants to deliberately tear down the group or its principles. The third destructive force is dictatorship. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. We do not give advice. We suggest by telling how we solve similar problems through our experiences. The very essence of Nar-Anon is that the whole program is merely suggested. We have no creed, charges, obligations, nor anything that would tend to hinder you. Your progress can be made in your own time and in your own way. We merely invite your attendance in a common cause. I think I skipped over the third destructive force is dictatorship. In the last paragraph, an important tool in our meetings is Nar-Anon Conference Approved Literature, CAL, written by and for our fellowship and approved at World Service Conference. It's an expression of Nar-Anon principles and the experience, strength, and hope of our members. Using CAL ensures members are hearing the same message no matter where they attend a meeting. This unites our members and avoids affiliation with outside causes in accordance with our traditions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And lastly, we will have today's sesh reading. Can I have a volunteer to read that?
Hi, I'll do that. That's Nicholas Thomas. Can you hear me?
I can. That's great. Thank you.
Good, good. And it's January 30th, right?
It is.
Okay. Fate to let go. The slogan, let go and let God, has become a tremendous comfort to me. At first, I resisted the idea of letting go of my will and giving it over to a higher power. It made no sense to me. As a mother, I felt I was not being loving towards my son. if I did not help him when he was in trouble. I felt guilty if I did not rescue him from jail. I kept hearing at meetings to keep an open mind. When I did this, I heard members share how they found the serenity I wanted. Their wisdom, strength, and hope were an inspiration, so I kept listening. Many shared how they found serenity by letting go of self-will and control. This was difficult for me at first, but with practice, eventually it became easier. I realized I was not helping by rescuing my son. It was easier for me to let go than it was to let God. Trusting an unseen power was even harder since I was not even sure I believed in a higher power. When I let go of my doubts and grabbed onto faith, I found a wonderful calmness. I practice this often and it always brings me serenity. Today's reminder, my faith keeps growing as I find that by letting go and letting God, seemingly unsolvable problems and are resolved in ways I would not have thought possible. If we were logically, if we were logical, the future would be bleak indeed. But we are more than logical. We are human beings, and we have faith, and we have hope, and we can work. From Jacques-Yves Cousteau. Thank you for letting me do your service.
Thank you, Nokma-sans, for your service. Okay, tonight, the only announcement I'll make is our 7th tradition. We have no dues or fees. We do have costs for the Zoom platform and other regional costs. You can make donations to our Ontario Speaks to support the Naranon program and its services. We are fully self-supporting through our own contributions. You can e-transfer or PayPal your contribution to Helping Hand and Heart 22@gmail.com. Pam, I see your hand is up.
Yes, there's a person on that's Galaxy A35 5G. It doesn't have a name.
Okay.
Could that be me?
No, it's somebody who's on a phone, a Galaxy.
A35 5G.
Somebody who's using their phone. Okay, I'm going to pop them back in to the waiting room, and then we'll figure it out. Thank you very much, Pam.
Sure.
Okay. Tonight is an open speaker, and if we have time at the end of the hour, we will open for sharing. But if there is a volunteer who wants to keep the room open after, that's fine too. Just let me know, and I'm happy to facilitate that. So let's get into listening to our speakers. We've got 2 speakers tonight, and both speakers are double winners. So if you don't know what that is, you're about to find out. And I did see someone made a comment about phone numbers, and that's fine. People sometimes like to put their phone numbers on with their name because that suggests that they're willing to take calls from people. So, Bonnie, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I will set the timer for you. So thanks very much, and thanks for your service, Bonnie.
Hi, I'm Bonnie, and I'm an addict. That's weird to say on a Naranon meeting. But I am. I've been recovering for a while. I'm just going to wind a little bit through my life and kind of try to show how addiction has run through it on, all the different ways. Just a little background. I was very different from people as a kid. And you know, you're not supposed to compare. The kids don't know that. And, you know, I was different in several ways. And the regular kids didn't want to play with me and things like that. And I was also a teacher's kid, and I was also an only child of a single parent when single parenting was not acceptable. And I started, you know, I went through grade school and high school and always was really shy. And I probably started partying a little bit when I was 15 or 16. And, you know, it was just, I'm from a rural town, so we always went to somebody's field and there was always kegs of beer. I hate beer, but but there were always tons of kegs of beer. And, you know, and everybody else had stuff, and we had our pot that was, everybody said homegrown was terrible, but for us it wasn't. We lived on the river bottoms, and we had some of the best stuff around. So anyway, and I started to drink a bit. Boone's Farm. Barely remember it. But I liked it over ice like Kool-Aid. Wasn't much of a alcohol taster. I didn't like it. I guess I married young. I went into the service right out of high school. I graduated when I was barely 17. And you couldn't hardly do anything then until you were 18, except go in the service. And a friend of mine and I did that. We were high and messing around, and we went to the recruiter's office and signed up. So I spent a little while in the Air Force, and man, you know, I was 17. I was homesick. I was lonely. But it doesn't matter on a base. As long as you're in the service, you can drink. And I started to drink, you know. Some of the things we did, we only had to be at school 6 hours a day. And the rest of the time, we were down at a bar, mostly, and we hustled pool for drinks. I don't think we ever paid for any. Me and a girlfriend of mine, she was really good. I could just hold her up. But, you know, and I was getting more and more addicted to alcohol. I wasn't really addicted to anything yet, but I was getting there. And one of the reasons I know that I'm an alcoholic is because drinking makes me incredibly ill. I mean, I'm not talking about a hangover. I'm talking 3 or 4 days sick. And if I keep doing that, you know, well, that's a sign. But anyway, I got out of the service and I got married, and my husband was in the service, and we had a couple little kids, and then we both started. We were drinking occasionally, and then we both started smoking pot and drinking with our friends we'd play cards and all that kind of thing. It was real social, but it was getting worse and worse for me. And then about, I guess it was 4 or 5 years later, maybe, I started having back spasms. And I had to go get shots in my back, and they hurt like hell. And my doctor, of course, at the time, they didn't, say anything about opioids or barbiturates or whatever. And he tried a couple things on me, and I had the first drug I ever fell in love with. And it was Fiorinol 3, Fiorinol with codeine. And that was the beginning of my real addiction. I did those more and more. And of course, it was no problem to get them legally. I didn't even have to go to different doctors or anything. My doctor would prescribe me whatever I wanted. And that continued for several more years. And of course, I added to it. I added, I had the alcohol going and the pot and the barbiturates and the opioid. And it's kind of like a garbage can thing. But when I was trying to think, the first time I got clean, I was 29, and a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, the one that I went to the Air Force with, she went through treatment, and she said she thought I ought to go too. And I was scared, but I did go. And it wasn't fun. It was a little weird because they had a detox part and then the regular part. And people were coming in, spending 2 or 3 days in the detox part and then going to the regular part. Well, I spent 2 weeks in detox, and I was like, what's going on here? And they finally told me. They said that the barbiturates in your system and the opioids take a long time for you to detox, and we had to keep you in there to make sure that that you would be okay. And I was like, wow, that's really something. That's when I started realizing how bad it was. And they introduced me to some NA meetings, but it was a long time ago, and there was one NA meeting in a small town that was about 30 miles away from where I lived. It was one a week. But we had a very loving AA community that was trying to help us get started. And they gave us a small room in their building, and they invited us to their meetings. They had eating meetings every month to celebrate anniversaries, and we were all welcome, as were our families. And it was a very loving place to be. And I didn't mention this before, but I didn't grow up with any kind of model for relationships with other people. My mother worked and went to school and was busy. She did a lot, she was doing research on her second master's degree. She was an academic. And, she was just always busy, and she never dated again. And so I didn't have any anything to model relationships after. So I got married at 19. And so after I got clean at 29, part of the reason I was using is my husband was very verbally abusive, and he would yell at me for hours, and I'm not exaggerating, hours. So I got high to, just to cope with it. And when I got clean, I divorced him a year later because, of course, he didn't change. And I couldn't do it anymore. And that was rough. And I did a lot of NA things. I went to NA conventions and this and that. I spoke at some. And trying to get the timeline. I can't remember a lot of things. But when I was 39 and single, I had a good job and that kind of thing, and I was still clean, but I had had depression most of my life, even when I was a kid. And I was, the pot was self-medicating. It always was. But then I remember it was July 4th. I had scheduled a weekend vacation with a very good friend of mine that lived in Washington State. And I was on the plane, and I knew I was depressed, and I said, I'm not going to go through this vacation depressed. So I started smoking pot again. I got married on the rebound a little bit later. Well, actually, I was clean then. This was in between. But I married an addict, of course. And, all we did was argue a lot and he wanted somebody to take care of him, and I really wasn't up for that. And I was a clean addict, and he was clean, but then he started using again. And that didn't last very long. I think we were married maybe 4 years. But then after I'd moved on, and then I went to the Washington friend of mine, I started smoking pot again. Now, this addiction had been winding its way around in my life till then, First here, and then my first husband, when I went through treatment, he went through outpatient treatment. He wasn't an addict, but he was stalking me in meetings and stuff, which was not comfortable at all. And so then I met my third husband. I was alone for quite a while, still smoking pot occasionally, not much. But after about, I think it was like 7 or 8 years, I met a guy, and our ages were very different. I'm 18 years older than him, and we just clicked. We could talk about anything in the world. We were both teaching Microsoft engineering, and so we were both in IT. So, we could talk tech and understand what we were talking about. and that kind of stuff. And, you know, we finally got married, you know, the next year. And we're still married. Our 24th anniversary is in a couple weeks. But he had some problems and started drinking. And then it got worse and worse and worse. Now, the first half of our marriage was wonderful. It is the best thing that ever happened to me, and I will never forget it. It was an amazing time. And, of course, you know, he was working his way into being an alcoholic. And, you know, he wasn't getting fallen down drunk. He was drinking his company culture. They worked remotely, and they sent flights of whiskey out to everyone's house, and they did whiskey tasting over Zoom. I never understood that. But anyway, it was very much a part of his company's culture. When we got married, I knew what IT schedules were like, and I said, I'm going back to accounting. Two of us with an IT schedule will not work. And so I did, and I started working for a company that I ended up working for 22 years. But then, trying to remember my timeline where I was, I'm bouncing. Okay, yeah. Anyway, my husband, after we'd been married about 13 or 14 years, he had worked his way up in a company to the director level. He was, you know, he's a genius at his IT stuff, you know, much more than me. I mean, he does things naturally that I have to study. But as he was going along with this, his company that he'd worked for and climbed the ladder in, he was in the strategic planning department with like 3 or 4 other guys. And the company downsized, and they cut the department. So it wasn't personal. All 4 guys were out of a job. And he took it very hard. And that was probably the start of the heavier drinking. And so I would smoke pot with him. I used with him to try to be with him and be a part of his life, because he really, you know, he just turned off after that. He kind of shut me out, and I did everything I could to just be a part of his life and be around him. And he was drinking more and more. And then I don't know, he was terrible with crashing cars. I don't know how many he went through. Never got a ticket, nothing. But then the really bad times started. He got fired from a job because he couldn't perform because he was drinking. And I was like, you know, you can go to treatment. And he thought about it and everything, and he said, well, I'll think about it. And I knew enough. I mean, I didn't forget everything I'd learned in 10 years in NA. And I knew that he wouldn't quit if he didn't want to. And he didn't, still doesn't. But after that, I completely switched over to the other side. I had gotten clean again. And I knew I was getting very addicted again just to the pot, but I was playing games in my head. Oh, I'm only going to do it on the weekends. Oh, I'm only going to do it these days, whatever. And that's what addicts do when they're addicted, and they play games sometimes. And I thought, oh my God, I need to get off this. And I had tried to find a higher power the first time I was clean. But I kept looking at different organized religions, not definitely, not just Christian ones, but all different religions. I did not catch the thing that said, you know, it could be of my understanding. Well, the second time I got clean, my higher power intervened. I had to go into the hospital because I was on some medication that had acted adversely to me, and I had to go in the hospital for a few days. And I called my husband and I said, I want everything gone. I don't want to see it again. You know, put it wherever you want. I don't want to see it again. And I've been clean since then. But he continued on, and of course I got more and more and more anxious. This is when I turned over kind of to the Nar-Anon side. He was acting crazy. I did have, you know, I already knew that I couldn't change him, and I didn't cause it because, you know, I was recovering. I knew what it was like. And he, you know, he still to this day says he doesn't have a problem with alcohol. And I had to go, I mean, I got so anxious, I had to go inpatient, outpatient, everything. And the last treatment place I was in, I was starting to come to Nar-Anon. And they were horrible. They messed up my meds so bad, they made me worse. So it took me a little while to get back to normal. But, you know, I was learning Nar-Anon, and I was learning detaching. But all I could do, I knew, was detach with anger. And I knew that wasn't right. But here I was, and you all know the story. I was not sleeping. I was not, you know, I was crying a lot. I was working all the time. And he stopped working that last time for 1.5 years. And that's when our finances went down the drain. And I ended up, I went to Florida to see some of my NA friends. My actual home group is in Florida. And I was down there, and they were so kind and nice to me and everything. I still just love them to pieces. And I was headed to the airport to come back, and I said, why am I settling for being treated like this? And the minute I got home, I started looking for places to live. And I was moving out of my home that my mother had died in, and she wanted me to take her insurance money and make her room into my room and office, and I did. And I had to leave that. That hurt me so bad. But I knew I had to leave, and I did. And I have grown in Nar-Anon. I have been able to detach with love, but I am going along more and more. I have a wonderful sponsor. Just finished almost finished with my 8th step. And we're just, my husband and I talk some, but I'm having to make some more decisions that he's not going to appreciate when he finds out about them. But I've got to take care of myself. I'm sorry, but I just, I'm 68 years old, and we've used all my retirement money. And so I'm taking some steps to become more equitable in our finances. So I keep going. I still love him very much, but I'm first. And that's what Nar-Anon has taught me, and my lovely sponsor has taught me. I have the best sponsor in the world. I have a very, very deep faith. My higher power runs my life, and I let him, or her, or whatever, about 90% of the time. The other 10 I want to take some back, but I ended up turning it back over. That's the way to live for me. And I guess that's about all I got to say. And thank you all for listening to me. And I really enjoy being here with all my Nar-Anon family. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Bonnie. Keep coming back,
Thank you,
Bonnie.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Okay, we'll just catch our breath and then turn over to you, Shelley.
Okay. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Let it be your words and not mine, and give me the courage to help myself and others heal in some way or another. Amen. My name's Shelley, and I've been living with addiction my whole life. I want to express my gratitude, first of all, for Lisa giving me this opportunity to speak tonight. I am nervous as heck, and so I really appreciate the members from Serenity Sunday that are here, and the members from AA that are here, and my sponsor, Carolyn, and any other Nar-Anon friends like Faith and so on that I've met in this program. So yeah, I'm so pleased to be here. I actually had a lot of feelings. I'm going to hide my self view here. I don't like looking at myself when I'm speaking. There we go. That's better. Anyway, so yeah, I just want to dive right into this because I've taken notes and I've thought about this, and I really just like to ad lib when it comes to sharing my experience, strength, and hope. And whatever God wants me to say is what I'm supposed to say, and if it doesn't come out right, that's okay too. I want to speak a little bit about my story, and I want to try and blend it in with my addicted loved one's story. And I will say, first of all, that our lives have run very parallel in so many ways. A lot of the trials and tribulations that I had growing up and experiences, trauma, different things that have happened have also been repeated in my daughter's life. And I know this is a safe place, so I'm wanting to protect her anonymity, but this is who I'll be referring to in this, so please keep it confidential. So I grew up in a family that there was 5 of us. There was my mom and dad, who were in their, 40 and 39 when they had me, so they were a bit older. My dad was a World War II veteran, and he had become an Ontario police officer. So there was a lot of uniforms and discipline and uniformity, structure, things that I loved and I had no problem with. My mom, she was raised in England during the war. That's where they met. And it was tough. It was really tough on her because half her family moved into the country during the war, and she was the oldest daughter, so she took a lot of responsibility for the family. And her father was an alcoholic, so the mom was angry, of course, and, used to hit them, and she just came from a rough background, and I think she always swore that she would never be that way, and so she was good with us. She never hit us. But she had a lot of anger and bitterness, and that's what I felt growing up was the same way that she was raised was the same way we got raised, and it was children are to be seen and not heard. So you don't have an opinion, you don't pick out your clothes, you don't pick your haircuts, you don't have anything to do with any of that. You just listen and don't interject or try to correct me in front of anybody or anything else because you'll be told off and you'll be shut down. And I had a brother and sister, 9 and 12 years older than me when I was born.
Whoa.
Yeah, Revo, yeah. So anyway, the fact that my sister was so much older made me in a position where she was like another mother. So I almost had two mothers. And I will tell you, speeding up, that up until my parents died, I still had problems with my sister trying to control me. And I mean, she's still the way she is. She's my sister. I feel that our family's always had a way to work it out. If we've had problems, we've worked it out. But there's a lot of illness there. Like there's a lot of stuff that's gone on in my life where I wasn't important. I didn't have a say. I wasn't allowed to be part of that family in so many ways growing up. My sister was so jealous of me and pushed me out of everything. So if they wanted to play cards, I would be sitting on the couch all by myself. They were out doing their own thing, drinking and drugging and whatever, and that they were my role models. So, I would do something wrong, I'd get in trouble, they'd get away with it. It just didn't seem fair. I mean, I worked it out in therapy. I've looked at it. I've realized that, maybe my parents said stuff to me because I was strong. I was a strong person. I was a strong warrior woman, let's say, because I was very independent. When I was about 12 years old, I had a terrible experience. I was date raped. It wasn't even a date. It was just, I was sexually assaulted by a friend. And I didn't know what to do. I had to shut my mouth because who was I going to talk to? Who was I going to talk to? I had nobody to talk to. I couldn't talk to my sister because we weren't friends. I couldn't talk to my mom. Couldn't talk to anybody. So this is how I started to progress with drugs and alcohol. And that's just one of the traumatic things that happened to me. And I don't want to get into trauma talk. That's the last thing I want to do. Just want you to relate to some of the feelings that sometimes when we grow up, those aces fall into place. Those childhood experiences come with us into our adulthood. By the time I was 16, I was a full-blown alcoholic addict. I was using drugs and alcohol every chance I could just to cope with life. I was being promiscuous. I thought that that was the way I was going to find love. And I lost my self-respect. I lost my dignity, my pride, everything at a very early age. And I remember feeling like I was on the brink of suicide. I felt like I was at the edge of the cliff, and I wanted to do something. And I said to God, God, if you're really there, please help me. Please help me. And all of a sudden, this opportunity opened up that I could leave home. A friend of mine, Debbie, whose father was basically the town drunk in her area, she wanted to get away too. So we left, and we went to Toronto. We stayed with some friends. We bounced around here and there, and finally, got into temporary work and stuff like that. And by about 6 months, I was working full time for a company that lasted about 7 years, and then I moved to a different one. And I always worked. I was a functioning addict, let's put it that way. But in the meantime, I didn't know how to deal with anything. So my coping skill was always drinking and using. I mean, I was using LSD. I was using mescaline and mushrooms and drinking. And, I'd go out at night and I'd end up at the other side of Toronto. It'd be 3 o'clock in the morning and I'd have to work the next day. And there I was, didn't even know where I was. And I'd have to find my way back home. So I became self-sufficient and got my own place, but I was still in the midst of this vortex of just irresponsibility and a real, F you attitude. If you don't like it, too bad. And that's what my daughter was like, right? So when my daughter started acting out, this is what I was seeing in her was my behavior was coming out in her, and I just couldn't believe that it was being cloned. Anyway, before I get to that, I just, hung around with people that used and drank, and that was my life, because who wanted to hang around with somebody that didn't? If you didn't offer me a beer or a drink when I was at your place, then I really didn't have much use for you. And I'll say it that way because that's how I felt. I wasn't going to stick around too long. I wasn't going to be your friend for very long. If you didn't give me, enough booze when I was at your place, then that wasn't somewhere that I really felt comfortable at. I tried quitting a number of times. I'd go to a party and cut myself off after 2 drinks, and I literally obsessed about it the whole rest of the night. So I couldn't be my own liquor control board. I couldn't, I just couldn't stop. And I would black out so bad that I didn't know where I was. I was in such bad blackouts that I would be, like I say, one part of the city, and then I'd end up in the other part of the city, and I wouldn't even know how I got there. So having a daughter who became addicted scared the hell out of me, excuse my language, but it did. And it made me realize that, wow, it almost made it worse because I knew what she was going through. So when I got to be 24 years old, something happened that made me really look at my own life. My daughter wasn't born yet, of course, but I had to look at my own life, and I came to the realization that I needed to quit. And it was something my father said to me. And again, like I said, it was funny because my sister was a fall-down drunk. She just disgraced us every which way but loose. And she never really got reprimanded, but I did. And I think, as I say, I mean, that was God's way of saying, you know what, Shelley, you can do better. And it's okay. You got broad shoulders. Stick it out. Like, just carry on and suck it up. So my father had said that if I ever wanted to come back to their place, that I would have to be, sober and, of course, clean, but that wasn't a phrase we used back in the 80s. And that was the way it was. He said, you're not welcome here anymore if you continue to be like this. And I hit my bottom. Okay? That was the right person at the right time that helped me to realize that if I didn't quit, I was going to lose my family. Now with my daughter, I didn't say that for a very long time. And I don't know why. It just seemed different being a mother. Anyway, when I was 24 years old, I did quit. And when I was 7 years sober, I met Jamie's dad, and he was in NA. So between the 2 programs, we used to get to a lot of meetings. And then I was pregnant with Jamie. We, attended the World NA conference or convention in Baltimore, and, You know, we did so much stuff together in so many meetings, and he used to speak a lot and I used to speak, and it was just an amazing network up in Toronto and then the Markham Stouffville area. Met a lot of good people up there, met some decent Mennonite people that became friends, and at that time, after Jim and I got married, it was a nice place to live. It was, you know, a nice community. I was going to church. There was just a lot of good stuff going on. And then, well, after I got married, I was pregnant. I got pregnant with Jamie, and I took some time off work about a week before Jamie was born just to sort of get into my groove. Anyway, I'm at home, and I get a knock on the door, and here it is, the superintendent from City of Toronto, or City of Scarborough at the time, where my husband worked, and he was with a police officer. And they said, can we come in and whatever, and I remember it so clearly that the superintendent just said, we just have to inform you that your husband was killed in an accident this morning at work. And I mean, it just floored me, right? Because obviously I don't want to take my feelings back there, because it's still, you know, painful once in a while, just sort of strikes me once in a while. But it was 4 days before Jamie was born, and it was devastating, but it was, I have to explain it this way. It was a spiritual experience for me, because when I was in the hospital, some weird things happened, and I had my family around me, you know, ready to give birth and everything else. And we were in this room, and it was this beautiful room at Markham Stouffville Hospital, and there was like beds. There was a bed for my mom, and there was all these chairs and a recliner and all this cool stuff. And this tape was playing, and it had, it was Van Morrison, Poets Compose or something, and it had our song on it from our wedding. And so the song Someone Like You kept playing all through the night, right? And it was just weird that they would put a tape recorder in there in the first place, but then to have that song playing. And then when I gave birth, again, surrounded by family, I just saw this celestial of angels. Like, it wasn't it wasn't like I saw them, but I felt this presence. Like, it was almost like these cherubs were like going around my head. And then it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and that was the day that he was buried. So they didn't want me to be away from the baby, so I didn't go to his funeral. But I wrote the eulogy, and it helped me to heal. It helped me to know that the whole church was packed. There was like 900 people there or something ridiculous. It was just unbelievable. And anyway, here was Jamie. Here was this beautiful little baby that, you know, her and I on our own. And my mom, well, she came and stayed with me for a couple of months. And she was really good, because we had had so many problems in the past, her and I, and we couldn't talk very well together. And this baby just kind of broke the ice and made it easy for her to be there and help me. So just before Christmas, it was about a week before Christmas, the guys came to fill the oil tank in this house that we'd been renting, and for some stupid reason, it was an old tank, and the air wasn't going out while the oil was coming in, and it combusted this like quarter-inch steel, galvanized steel oil tank inside the basement, and 100 gallons of oil was on my floor the next day. This is 2 months after he died. So I literally had to move with the baby the next day, and everything in my house had to be cleaned. It was just so weird. And I felt like the whole world was caving in on me, and that the rug had been pulled out from underneath me. I just was devastated, and I was like putting my head in my hands and saying, God, why are you doing this to me, right? Why is this happening? And, you know, in Naranon, I've learned that God has a plan, right? And that we don't always know the answers or why things are going on, but to just have faith that everything's going to be okay. And what happened next was what made it okay. So we moved to Buckhorn to just stay here temporarily. And turned out that I never did go back to Markham Stouffville. I left behind a big network of people that I knew there, and moved to Buckhorn to be with family and old friends and to be in a community that I used to belong to years ago that I had really screwed up in. So it was the last thing that I wanted to do was to move back to Buckhorn because I was so ashamed of my behavior when I was using. And, but I was 7 years clean. And as soon as I got here, somebody reached out to me and said, there's an AA meeting just down the road if you'd like to go, you know. And that was the beginning of what turned into be a wonderful life for Jamie and I. She grew up in a small town. She went to a small town school. She had lots of friends. I went to lots of activities with her. I got her into figure skating, and she did the normal partying, right? She partied with her friends at high school, and that was okay, right? Like I didn't really have a big problem with that. But then she started to pick the wrong people. She started to go with people that weren't her high school friends anymore, and she was leaving her high school friends behind, and she was getting into different drugs that were a lot harder than just, you know, a bit of drinking and a bit of pot. Anyway, that started when she was about 15, 16 years old, really bad when she was 18, got into an abusive relationship. The guy kidnapped her, kept her captive. Like there was so much trauma. And she just continued to use, and she just continued to use harder drugs and get with people that used harder drugs, got onto another boyfriend that got her onto fentanyl, patches. It was everything under the sun that she's done the last 15 years. So speeding it up, because we're getting short for time, I see. The last year of her using was complete and utter hell. She had been living with us after treatment. She moved into this room, and it was a beautiful little room in a house that was newly renovated. She caused so many problems in that place that they tried every which way to evict her, and they were coming up to a hearing. They finally had to literally pay her 2 months' rent to move out. If you can imagine, they were mentally distraught. 2 other roommates had moved out because of all the drugs and the dealers and the prostitutes and everybody, dogs and friggin' ridiculous shit that was going on. It was the worst nightmare ever. So then she wanted to get clean. Finally, took her to Toronto, got her into a detox. When she's leaving detox, she says, Mom, they told me I was pregnant. And I said, oh, okay, well, how do you feel about that? Well, I'm kind of freaked out, but it's okay, you know, and she was just going into the Renaissance house. So she went into the Renaissance house and she dipped out after 10 days. Then she used so hard for the next 5.5 months. She had leg sores from intravenous needles in her leg. She finally checked herself into the hospital. She had great big sores, like deep flesh-eating wound sores on her legs. And they told her she was still pregnant. Oh my God, my heart friggin' sunk into my gut. And I didn't know what to do. And I just remember being so unhappy, and I was so scared, and I was just grieving like we all do, right? We go through all these stages of grief with our loved ones where we don't know where they went. Where does that person go? Where did they go, right? And then now she's bringing a baby into the world. Like, it was just devastating. And I'll never forget this. Jerry said to me from our group, she said, well, if you can't be happy, can you just be happy for her? Can you just be happy for her? And it changed my way of thinking. And I thank you, Jerry, because that's when I was able to just go out and start buying stuff and, you know, doing what a grandma does, right? Like I didn't enjoy the pregnancy. You know, it was just so rushed and it was just a hard time. Like she wasn't even due until December 6th. And as it turned out, the baby came November 1st. So like everything was sped up. Everything was just chaotic. And then I'm dealing with her mental health, right? Like she's got a personality disorder. She's got like all this shit going on, excuse my language. And the vindictiveness and just the hatefulness and all the crap that's going on. And I'm thinking, how is this ever going to happen? How are we ever going to deal with all this? Anyway, long story short, it was a gift from God. It was a blessing and a miracle that this baby came out the way that she did. She's so beautiful. And she was treated for the withdrawals because Jamie was on methadone and Cadian and all these things. And they treated her for all these different things just to make sure she was going to be okay. And God bless her, man. She's just a beautiful little baby. And, you know, I still worry. I worry about things. But I think, you know what? I'm strong now. She was away for a year using. I got to be stronger in Ar-Anon. I got to build myself up. I got to be strong so I could be strong for her. And I thank God for my sponsor, Carolyn, who's been working these steps with me for over a year now. And we're on step 12. Yay! You know, so anyway, I did want to say a few other things that I'm not going to share because, you know, it's just not enough time. I just shared from my heart tonight, and I really just wanted to do that, you know. But I just want to say how important it is to remember that the problem and the solution are not in the same place, whether we're addicted to drugs and alcohol or we're addicted to the addict. That was me, right? The problem and the solution is not in the same place. The solution is in the steps. Steps 1 to 3 help me find God again. The next 7 steps help me find myself. And then step 11 just deepen my relationship with my higher power. And step 12 is about having a serving heart and doing what I can on any level to help those who need help, and including myself. So with that, I just want to say a thank you. And I'll read the 3rd step prayer. Higher power, guide me on my journey to peace and serenity. Help me to let go of self-will and turn my life over to your care. Thank you all for being here. Let me share.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thanks
so
to you,
much.
Shelley.
Thank you.